All right, welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive.
Definitely. Always ready to jump into the latest Bitcoin happenings.
Well, this week, it's Bitcoin during a week that was, well, pretty explosive. We're talking all-time highs, institutions pouring money in, even a court case that sounds like something out of a movie.
Yeah, when I saw this week's report, I'm like, whoa, hold on, where do we even begin?
Eh.
It's really incredible to see how all these different worlds, finance, government, even pop culture, are all getting caught up in the Bitcoin whirlwind.
For sure. Okay, so let's break down this wild week. And I guess the natural place to start is with Bitcoin's price. Obviously, the big news, it smashed through to a new all-time high of $99,768.
Just incredible to see.
But then things get a bit more interesting. There was a bit of a dip after that.
Yeah, and this is what I find so fascinating. This price action gives us a real peek into how Bitcoin is maturing as an asset. That initial surge, a lot of it was driven by things like, remember earlier this year when those Bitcoin ETFs were finally approved?
Oh, yeah.
That opened the floodgates for all the big institutional players to jump in. And then, as this report highlights, you had some long-term holders who decided, all right, time to take some profits off the table. So that's where you saw that little dip. Classic market psychology at work.
So even with that dip, Bitcoin still finished the week pretty strong.
Yeah.
What does it tell us about the bigger picture?
Exactly. It kind of stabilized around $96,635, which shows real resilience. The main takeaway here is that Bitcoin is behaving more and more like a traditional asset. It's reacting to global trends, economic news, but also, as we just saw, good old human behavior.
Okay, so that's the roller coaster ride of Bitcoin's price this week. Let's zoom out a bit and talk about some of the big names involved. MicroStrategy, they just keep doubling down on Bitcoin. They just bought another 7,200 Bitcoins.
I know, it's mind-blowing. They now hold something like almost 2% of all the Bitcoin in circulation. Just think about that for a second. That's an insane amount of influence for one company. And it's not just about them hoarding Bitcoin. It's about their conviction in its future. I mean, their stock price has gone up, what, over 450% this year?
It's crazy.
What's so interesting to me, though, is that other institutions are watching this. MicroStrategy is sending a signal. Bitcoin isn't just a passing fad. This is an asset class worth taking very seriously.
Right, it's like they're setting the tone. So we've got MicroStrategy going all in. Then you have companies like Marathon Digital Holdings. They're also stocking up on Bitcoin. And get this, Tesla's back in the game. They're accepting Bitcoin payments again in some places.
Yeah, remember back in 2021 when they pulled back because of all the uncertainty around regulation?
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
This move by Tesla, it might suggest that the regulatory landscape is shifting, becoming more favorable for Bitcoin. What were the specific changes that allowed this to happen? That's something we definitely need to keep our eyes on because it could mean much wider adoption is coming.
All right, speaking of wider adoption, let's go global. Brazil is seriously considering putting 5% of their national reserves into Bitcoin.
Yeah, this is where things get really, really interesting. They see Bitcoin as a way to protect themselves against global instability. I mean, we're seeing fiat currencies struggle in a lot of places. If Brazil actually goes through with this, it could be a total game changer. Other countries might start to think, hey, maybe we should do that too.
It's such a contrast to what's happening in the EU. They seem way more focused on developing their own digital currencies.
Absolutely. It's almost like we're watching two totally different paths unfold. The EU wants to play it safe with a more centralized approach. While Brazil is making a bold move, they're embracing a decentralized future with Bitcoin. It really begs the question, which path will the rest of the world choose?
Okay, so we've got price swings, big institutions making moves, governments entering the scene. Now let's talk about Bitcoin mining. This report said that mining difficulty just hit an all-time high. Can you break that down for us? What does that actually mean?
Basically, it means that mining Bitcoin is more computationally expensive than ever before. You need more powerful computers, more energy. But here's the thing that I find really interesting. Even with these costs going up, miners are still jumping in. They're not being scared off.
So they're not deterred.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And that signals a really strong belief in the long-term value of Bitcoin. This isn't just speculation anymore. It's a calculated bet on the future of this whole technology.
And it's not just about the technology itself, it's how it's being used, right? This report highlighted a big shift towards renewable energy in the mining space. Like Riot Platforms, they're partnering up with solar farms. And Core Scientific, they're looking into geothermal energy.
This is so important because it addresses one of the biggest criticisms of Bitcoin, its environmental impact. As more mining operations switch to sustainable energy sources, Bitcoin becomes much more acceptable on a global scale.
Mhm.
It could even end up driving the adoption of renewable energy, which would be amazing.
Okay, so far we've covered soaring prices, government strategies, even eco-friendly mining. But, well, this is Bitcoin. So naturally, there's got to be some drama. Remember the Bitfinex hack from back in 2016?
Oh yeah, how could I forget?
Well, the couple behind it were just sentenced.
Heather Morgan and Ilya Lichtenstein. Their whole story is just wild. They were living this lavish lifestyle, all funded by stolen Bitcoin. Sounds like a Netflix movie, right?
It totally does.
But beyond the whole intrigue of it, this case just underlines how important it is to keep your Bitcoin safe. The technology itself might be secure, but human error is still a huge factor.
Oh, for sure. And speaking of cautionary tales, there's the ongoing saga of James Howells. Remember, he accidentally threw away a hard drive with 8,000 Bitcoins on it back in, what was it, 2013?
Oh yeah, ouch.
Well, he's still fighting to dig up that landfill.
It's like a real-life treasure hunt with insane stakes. He's actually suing the Newport City Council for like almost £500 million.
Seriously.
Yeah, but they're saying no way, mostly because of environmental concerns. But this whole situation, as unfortunate as it is for him, really highlights that with blockchain technology, there's no going back. If those Bitcoins are gone, they are gone for good.
So we've gone from record-breaking highs to legal battles, institutional adoption to environmental issues. What a week for Bitcoin.
This week really sums up the whole Bitcoin ecosystem. Dynamic, constantly evolving, full of incredible potential, but also with real risks.
We've covered a ton, but there's still so much to unpack. What are the experts saying about where Bitcoin goes from here?
I think the feeling is cautiously optimistic. You know, you've got all this institutional money still flowing in, plus everyone's worried about the regular markets. So a lot of people think Bitcoin could easily break through that $100,000 mark pretty soon. But, and this is important for anyone listening who's thinking about investing, there are definitely some concerns about a possible correction, a dip in the price.
Oh, so it's not all sunshine and rainbows.
Well, the report does mention things like interest rates going up, and there's a chance of some big withdrawals from those Bitcoin ETFs. Those things could definitely trigger a downturn.
So it sounds like even though things look good for Bitcoin, there could be some bumps in the road. It's not just a buy it and forget it kind of thing.
Exactly. You got to stay informed,
Mm-hmm.
really understand what's going on, all the forces at play. And actually, speaking of those forces, we can't ignore the whole regulatory landscape. We talked about Tesla dipping their toes back into Bitcoin payments. But remember when they pulled out back in 2021?
Yeah, because of all the regulatory uncertainty back then. What's changed? Is the U.S. being nicer to crypto now?
Well, it's not a simple yes or no. The report highlights how President Trump, after being reelected, he's pushing policies that would make the U.S. a leader in all this blockchain innovation. So basically, it looks like a more hands-off approach, letting the industry grow without too much government interference.
That's interesting because it's so different from what the EU is doing. They seem to be much more cautious, more focused on those central bank digital currencies, right?
Right. It's like we're watching a tug of war on a global scale, two different visions for the future of finance. The U.S. seems to be leaning towards a more decentralized open system, which Bitcoin represents, while the EU wants a more centralized, controlled approach with their digital currencies.
Makes you wonder which model will win out in the end. But stepping back from all the global politics for a second, I'm curious, why is Bitcoin getting so much traction in the first place? Why are all these big institutions, even governments, starting to take it seriously?
Well, there are a few key reasons. One is the growing concern about the U.S. dollar. How stable is it really? And inflation is rising. The report talks about this specifically. Bitcoin, because there's a limited supply, only 21 million coins will ever exist. It's seen as a hedge against these problems with traditional economies.
It's like that whole digital gold idea, right? People are looking for safe havens for their money in uncertain times.
Exactly. And then beyond that, you've got all the technological advances happening within the Bitcoin ecosystem itself. We talked about the move towards renewable energy for mining, but the core technology itself is constantly improving. The report mentions the increasing hash rate of the Bitcoin network, which basically means it's getting more powerful and more secure. That just makes people even more confident in the system.
So it's like a constantly evolving system, getting stronger and more secure over time. But let's not forget about the human element, right? We talked about the Bitfinex hack, but there's also that story of James Howells still trying to dig up his lost Bitcoin fortune from that landfill.
Yeah, those stories, as crazy as they sound, they remind us that Bitcoin, as advanced as it is, still exist in a world where humans make mistakes.
Big time. It just underscores how important it is to understand how to store your Bitcoin safely. It's not enough to just buy it. You need to understand how it all works, the risks, and how to protect yourself.
You got it. And that actually brings us to what I think is at the heart of why Bitcoin is so appealing. It gives individuals control over their own finances. You don't need banks. You don't need governments.
That's a powerful idea, especially when trust in those institutions is so low. But I guess with great power comes great responsibility.
Absolutely. And that's where education is so important. It's not enough to just buy Bitcoin anymore. People need to understand the technology, the risks involved, and how to manage their assets responsibly.
And that's exactly what we're trying to do here on the deep dive, right? Give our listeners the knowledge and insights they need to navigate this crazy, constantly changing world.
Exactly. We want you to walk away from this not just knowing more, but feeling empowered. Empowered to make your own decisions about Bitcoin, whether it's investing, using it for transactions, or just becoming more knowledgeable about this incredible technology.
And that's the beauty of Bitcoin. It's for everyone. You can be a seasoned investor, a tech geek, or someone who's just curious about the future of money. There's a place for everyone in this ecosystem.
Couldn't agree more. But regardless of where you fall on that spectrum, the most important thing is to stay engaged, stay curious, and keep learning.
Absolutely. So to wrap up this part of our deep dive, we want to leave you with this thought. Bitcoin is more than just a digital currency. It's a movement. It's a vision of a future where financial power isn't controlled by a few, and everyone has more control over their own lives. Yeah, it really feels like we're at a turning point. But let's zoom in a bit. We've talked about Wall Street and governments. What about regular people? How is Bitcoin impacting their lives?
That's a great question. I mean, sure, the headlines always focus on the big players, but Bitcoin's real power is how it can help ordinary people, communities all over the world. You think about places with really unstable currencies, or where people can't even access a bank.
Yeah, those are really important points.
Bitcoin gives them a way to store value, send money, all of that, securely and cheaply. And it doesn't matter where they live or how much money they have.
It's like financial inclusion on a global scale, cutting out the middleman, no more banks.
That's exactly it. And it's not just individuals, right? Small businesses can use Bitcoin for international payments. Way less hassle, much lower fees. It levels the playing field, gives those smaller players access to the same financial tools that used to only be for the big guys.
Wow. So we're talking about transforming global commerce, empowering individuals, completely reshaping finance as we know it. That's a lot to take in.
It is. And it's still early days. There will definitely be challenges, risks. We're all still learning as we go.
Yeah. That's where critical thinking is so important, right? It's easy to get caught up in all the excitement about this decentralized future, but you have to be realistic. Approach it with a healthy dose of skepticism. Don't just believe everything you hear.
Could agree more. Do your own research, look at different viewpoints, and never, ever invest more than you can afford to lose. This is uncharted territory, and with that comes uncertainty.
Exactly. So we encourage you, our listeners, use what we've discussed today as a jumping off point. Go deeper into the topics that interest you, check out those resources mentioned in the report, form your own opinions.
Like we always say, knowledge is power, especially with something like Bitcoin. The more you understand, the better you can navigate this whole landscape, which can be exciting, but also, let's be honest, a little bit unpredictable at times.
Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive into this crazy week in Bitcoin, we want to leave you with this. The future of finance, it's being created right now, and you have say in how it unfolds.
Whether you decide to dive headfirst into Bitcoin, just watch from the sidelines, or get involved in building this technology, the key is to stay informed, stay engaged, stay curious.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this journey. We hope you've learned something new, gained a new perspective on the incredible potential of Bitcoin. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.